This is CNN, a network of Turner Broadcasting System.
With all the years we've been here, through all the earthquakes we have, this is the roughest.
It happens so fast that you really don't have that much time to think.
I just think it's terrifying. It's just absolutely terrifying.
Scenes of devastation and despair in Northern California. In San Francisco, an eerie calm hangs over the city 24 hours after the nation's second worst earthquake ever.
This is CNN's Prime News with Lou Waters in San Francisco and at CNN Center in Atlanta, Susan Rook.
Good evening. The Bay Area is struggling to cope with a catastrophe. At least 271 people are feared dead, and authorities are searching for more victims. The biggest disaster came in Oakland, where a two-tiered freeway collapsed at the height of rush hour. Police believe the collapse killed more than 250 people. In San Francisco, at least 9 people died, 3 of them in a massive fire that leveled a full city block in the Marina District. In Santa Cruz, closer to the quake's epicenter, at least 4 people died and 2 bridge spans are down. The stories of destruction go on and on. My co-anchor Lou Waters is in San Francisco. Lou, what's the situation there this evening?
Well, Susan, as you mentioned, it was 24 hours ago when the earth moved, and this Bay Bridge behind me, the sturdy giant that was built in the early 1930s, couldn't take it anymore. Part of it collapsed, people died. Across the bay at San Francisco's Candlestick Park, 50,000 people roared a collective sigh of relief when the earth stopped moving and Candlestick Park stopped weaving to and fro outside Candlestick. 6 hours worth of traffic jam. That later proved to be a blessing. For over on the east side of the bay, a collapse of the Nimitz Freeway, a double-decker highway. Hundreds died. It's 24 hours later, and the Bay Area is in aftershock. Tonight, we have a report from CNN's Robert Vito, who tells us about that night to remember.
San Franciscans spent the night in shock and fear after the worst earthquake to hit this city in 83 years. By daybreak, the digging out for survivors and bodies began. The scene was repeated over and over. Firemen crawled in and out of the debris, searching for victims. Some couldn't believe they were looking at the aftermath of the worst earthquake the city has seen since 1906, when San Francisco was virtually destroyed by fire.
I saw it last night, and we wanted to come down in daylight to see what it looked like, and it was even worse than daylight, I'll tell you.
I just think it's terrifying.
It's just like a bad movie. It's like things you see in the movies. It's hard to believe it's real.
In the East Bay area, several oil storage tanks ruptured, sending thousands of gallons of oil into the bay. The White House dispatched Vice President Dan Quayle to tour the devastation.
We want to take care of the people that have lost their home, have lost property, have loss of life.
Certainly.
That is our immediate attention.
In all, the city wasn't its busy, hectic south, but some tried to make the best of a bad situation.
I think people will get beyond this, and they'll come back to work, and we'll go back to living.
City officials say they will get San Francisco back to normal soon, but some here believe that with such widespread devastation, it won't be soon at all. Robert Vito, CNN, San Francisco.
The major tragedy in the East Bay, the collapse of the double-decker Nimitz Freeway, causing some second, even third thoughts tonight about construction of the Bay Area freeways. Greg Lamont joins us live with that story.
Just 24 hours ago at 5:04 in the afternoon, San Francisco was in a state of shock, of panic. A 6.9 earthquake rocked the Bay Area and collapsed the Nimitz Freeway just behind me, right in the height of rush hour and bumper-to-bumper traffic. Initially, efforts to make rescues were hindered by the darkness, but after a full day of sunshine, the first day was marked of a long road back.
Oakland police are now using dogs in the search for remaining bodies trapped in a tomb that used to be the upper deck of Oakland's Nimitz Freeway. 1.5 miles of the deck came crashing down on bumper-to-bumper rush hour traffic during this major earthquake. Police say there's no evidence of human life in the rubble, and rescuers say the same.
Yeah, there was some areas where it really fell flat. You could tell that anyone in there was they just had it.
Authorities spent the morning hours trying to decide how to excavate the bodies, and by afternoon had begun the process in earnest. Some used drills, others used cement bashers, and were all along aided by volunteers.
People were very good. This is mostly a black neighborhood, poor people. They bought ladders, they bought 50-foot extension cords, they brought back flashlights, wire cutters, bolt cutters, and car jacks, because we needed some kind of hydraulic jacks. And they brought back chains, anything that they could bring back, they brought back.
It was a sensational performance by the people of San Francisco. They cared for one another, they helped one another, whether it was people helping others get to the hospital as walking wounded, as they were called, with flying glass, whether it was people helping at intersections, filling in as volunteer traffic directors, and obviously the people in the marina who helped move fire hoses from the ocean 6 blocks to where from the bay, the ocean water from the bay, 5 or 6 blocks to where it was directed on the fire. There are heroic acts all over. San Francisco has risen to the occasion in every sense of the word.
Police will only confirm a handful of deaths, but admit more bodies have been seen in the rubble, and it's believed more than 200 will be found.
But it will take days and possibly weeks to get all the bodies out. Excavation in this case must be very delicate, and special tools, cranes, and equipment will have to be brought in to protect the workers' lives.
Rescuers say they managed to pull 25 people from the clutches of death, but they say they will always be haunted by the screams of those begging for help.
The activity going on behind me has been going on all day long. Reporters here obviously interested in this story, and plus it gives us a backdrop and gives us a good view of the real damage that was done to this Nimitz Freeway. Specifically also, the mayor's motorcade is expected to show in just a few minutes, and what he'll do is give us a briefing on today's activities. There will be some grim news, however. The dogs that do the sniffing did their job today, and they found 2 bodies, 2 of what is expected to be many more bodies inside this tragic incident. Greg Lamont, CNN, reporting live from Oakland.
All right, Greg, and you may be able to hear the sirens beneath me, 40 floors below in the Mission District of San Francisco. There's still work to be done tonight. There's another story to report, too, the major story of the burst of fire in the Marina District last night, living testimony to the dangers of living in pre-1970 housing here in San Francisco. We'll tell that story, and I'll be back with more from here in San Francisco in just a bit. Now back to Susan Rook at CNN Center.
And as Prime News continues in Washington, President Bush clears the way for federal relief aid, and he plans a trip to San Francisco to survey the damage.
Prime News is brought to you by Buick.
It's a feeling of power, of substance and style. You know that you're on your way. The great American road belongs to Buick.
These well-dressed gentlemen have no idea that the delightful chill in the air is maintained by Honeywell control technology. But if they had to think about that, we wouldn't be doing our job. Honeywell, helping you control your world.
Picture yourself.
Katie Quick at 7B.
With the style that comes through. Picture yourself. Picture yourself. Picture yourself in that stand.
Call now and you can have 13 weeks of the Wall Street Journal and this valuable 120-page guide to understanding money and markets. That's 13 weeks of the Journal for the news and ideas you need every business day. And this guide free, which tells you everything you want to know about money and markets, now for only $34. Call toll-free 800-638-9600. Today's Wall Street Journal. Faster, tougher, smarter. Call 800-638-9600 now.
Want to get wholesome and hearty instantly? Eat Nabisco Wholesome and Hearty Oat Bran hot cereal in apple cinnamon honey or regular. Instantly. The only instant hot oat bran. Delicious. Get Nabisco Wholesome and Hearty Oat Bran instantly.
From CNN, a one-hour report that changes the face of evening news. Expected from the people whose only job
Stand by.
is to bring you the world. The World Today, weeknights on CNN.
Updating our top story, the deadly earthquake that rocked Northern California to its core. In Oakland, rescuers have given up hope of finding any more survivors in the sandwich strips of highway that made up Interstate 880. Search dogs sniffed, rescuers listened with sensitive microphones, but there were no more signs of life. More than 250 people are believed entombed in more than a mile of the crumbled Nimitz Freeway. Search efforts have been hampered now by darkness, and there are concerns that the mangled highway could collapse like a house of cards and claim more lives. In other news, after 2 delays and a legal challenge, the shuttle Atlantis has lofted into orbit. The liftoff appeared flawless at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. CNN's John Zarella was there for the blastoff.
The weather played games with NASA again on Wednesday. At the Kennedy Space Center, clouds billowed and rolled across the sky. At transatlantic emergency abort sites, rain and haze threatened to force the space agency to cancel its 3rd attempt to launch the shuttle Atlantis. The countdown was taken down to 5 minutes and held while the launch team waited for clearance to fly. Moments later, they got it.
We have a go on tail weather with Zaragoza, which we're configuring to at this time. RTLS is also go, so we're go for launch.
Copy. You go then to pick up the clock at 5.
As the clock ticked down, final checks of the system were made. Other than the weather, the countdown was near perfect.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have ignition and liftoff of Atlantis and the Galileo spacecraft bound for Jupiter.
Cheers went up in the firing room as Atlantis headed skyward, an emotion that will always spill over at liftoff.
It's a great moment. It takes so much effort from so many people, and there's so much adrenaline that people are going to be human.
Anti-nuclear protesters had threatened to infiltrate the launch site, but that never materialized. Their concern was the cargo on board Atlantis, the $1.4 billion nuclear-powered Galileo spacecraft destined for Jupiter. It is the most sophisticated probe ever built. Scientists say the data and pictures it will send back will make the recent images from Voyager look like a sideshow.
Voyager was like trying to read a book from the top of the Empire State Building, and Galileo is like picking up the books and holding it in your hands. That's the difference in resolution.
It will take Galileo 6 years to reach Jupiter. From here on, NASA's launch schedule picks up dramatically. 2 more before the end of the year. A secret Department of Defense mission in November, and a 10-day Christmas mission to deploy a satellite and retrieve another. John Zarella, CNN, at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida.
The pilot's windows have a shape that takes a lot of time to make. I thought if we spent more time working the window frames in a soft condition, we would save time in the final step. We get a completed part in a soft condition before it goes into the heat treat. Now we make 8 in the same time we used to make 1, and it's a better window.
People with the power to do a better job build a better product. McDonnell Douglas, a company of leaders.
President Bush promised today to take every step and make every effort to help earthquake victims. Mr. Bush took an important first step. He formally declared 7 California counties a disaster area. That directed an initial $273 million in federal relief funds to the battered Bay Area. As CNN's Candy Crowley reports, the president and the Federal Emergency Management Agency made a point of moving fast.
Even as parts of Northern California rumbled with aftershocks, the president moved to cushion the blow.
There's a lot of interest out there in when you may be ready to sign this disaster declaration.
I've already signed it. Yeah.
They wanted to know.
That was taken care of.
Criticized for being too slow in responding to the Exxon oil spill and bureaucratic inertia in responding to Hurricane Hugo, the Bush administration, with the Federal Emergency Management Agency coordinating, was on the case even before California's official cry for help.
We are ready. We have practiced for this event. We came online very quickly, many hours before the declaration or the request.
In a symbolic show of support, President Bush dropped by FEMA to buoy beleaguered troops.
We got an up-to-date briefing on where things stood,
but I had an opportunity to thank the men and women of FEMA and the volunteers.
It's just a little disheartening to have worked, you know, as hard as we have to get on top of the Virgin Islands and then to try and get on top of the situation in the Carolinas and to begin to see some daylight with respect to these operations and then have to go back and start the process all over again.
At the moment, federal officials are trying to assess the area of greatest need. Vice President Dan Quayle and Transportation Secretary Samuel Skinner are both on the scene to provide moral support and coordinate logistical support. Top priority, saving lives and reducing property losses. A Navy construction battalion with heavy lift equipment was dispatched to Interstate 880, which collapsed on top of itself, crushing more than 200 rush-hour traffickers between tons of concrete. Food and shelter for those stranded by the break in the Bay Bridge are being provided by the Naval Station, Treasure Island. Army and Navy hospitals in the area are tending to civilian casualties. Military helicopters are available for rescue efforts, and naval ships are off the coast to help fight fires or assist with anything else that is necessary. Military police have been dispatched to help with traffic control. And the IRS has announced that quake victims will not have to meet their federal tax deadlines this year. Amid the destruction, few are willing to say how much all of this and more will cost, but that appears to be the least of federal concerns.
Hopefully we'll have enough, but if we don't, the Congress and the President have historically, regardless of the administration, been expedient in providing funds.
Members of the House and Senate, Republican leadership on both sides agreed that we would expedite any request he made.
The tragedy in California has also prompted offers of global assistance. Cable traffic to the State Department is heavy with messages of condolences from other governments, including an offer of help from the Soviet Union. Privately, officials say the answer is thanks, but no thanks. The U.S. can handle it. The president has promised Northern Californians he will take every step to help, and that includes a trip to the coast. White House officials say Mr. Bush plans to fly there Friday. Candy Crowley, CNN, Washington.
The quake hit hard in San Francisco's Marina District at the foot of the Bay Bridge. A broken gas line sparked a fire that burned a full city block. Several buildings suffered so much damage they'll have to be torn down. Don Knapp is standing by in the Marina District. Don, what's the latest on the situation there?
Susan, some 23 hours after the earthquake struck, the first of the demolitions began. We are in the heart of the Marina District. The building behind us was a 4-story apartment building. It was only 2 stories above the ground at the time the demolition began. It's one of about 19 buildings in this area in similar situation. Apartment buildings that have been so heavily damaged they have to be destroyed. There are perhaps 40 other buildings in San Francisco so badly damaged that people can't live in them. With me is San Francisco Battalion Chief Mike Moran. Chief, one of the reasons you destroyed this building was because you have dead people inside, right?
Well, exactly, and we have to have our men are going to go in there and try and recover them. We did go in earlier before we started this demolition, and we found out that it just looked much too hazardous. The beams were twisted, the walls were cracking. Yeah, the structure was actually moving. And since we determined in all probability that there were no live bodies in there, we decided to bring in the heavy equipment and knock down the walls, knock down the roofs, and then go in there from ground level and try to recover the bodies that way.
Can we assume we'll see the same procedure on those other heavily damaged buildings?
They probably will be that way. I haven't heard whether they've found any victims over there or not, and it might be the reason why we're concentrated here with the heavy equipment that we have.
I know we've been playing it minute by minute, hour by hour, but what is the long-term plan for the marina? Do you know?
The long-term plan for the marina, at least around here, is to check all the structures. The main thing to know about here is that this is all landfill area, and it's when you have an earthquake, the magnitude is just multiplied many times here, and that's why you had a lot of these buildings literally knocked right off their foundation, and that's what makes them so unsafe. The structure damage wasn't that bad in other parts of San Francisco, but there are parts of San Francisco, including here, that is landfill, and that's why you have some of these spectacular shots of houses right off their foundation.
We've been talking, 270, 80 people dead in the Bay Area. How many here in the marina?
Marina, I'm not sure. The last count I had from the coroner in the city of San Francisco, and this is maybe 8 hours ago, was 10, and that's not counting the 2 that we're going to find in here.
Thank you, Chief. Once again, about 20 buildings in San Francisco that look this bad, another 40 buildings that are uninhabitable, and we can tell you just by taking walks through the city streets here, you can't go to any city block in the marina area where you can't find some damage. Susan, back to you.
All right, Don Knapp reporting live from the Marina District of San Francisco. Thanks for keeping us up to date. Well, the folks at the American Red Cross are struggling to deal with two back-to-back disasters. First, Hurricane Hugo, now California's killer quake. Though its resources are severely strained, the Red Cross has snapped into action in Northern California. CNN's Patricia Ox has that.
The Red Cross has opened more than a score of emergency shelters in the Bay Area. And as always, when disaster strikes, they are providing cots, blankets, food, and other urgently needed items.
Right now, we have vehicles from all over the western states converging on the affected area, from other Red Cross chapters.
Thank goodness for organizations like the Red Cross, these local volunteer organizations that are already swinging into play out there. Community police, the firefighters, working around the clock. Our hearts go out to them.
And well, they should. Last month, the Red Cross faced Hurricane Hugo with just $10 million in the bank, but spent $40 million on emergency assistance. Now the relief agency is $30 million in the red.
We're in a $42 million campaign to fund those disaster operations. This operation will take even more of our volunteers and paid staff and need even more money to provide the services in the Bay Area.
800 Red Cross staff and volunteers are still at work on the Hugo cleanup, and officials indicate 500 to 1,000 more are being pulled from other programs to staff the latest disaster effort.
Okay, well, anyways, I did want to...
In Washington, the Red Cross Situation Room is working around the clock.
So the best way that people can help is to send cash. Don't send food. Don't send clothing. That clogs the pipeline. That only hinders relief, not help it.
In Los Angeles, the winner of a local radio station's contest lent his spirit to the relief effort. He asked the station to take back the sports car he won and write out a check instead, payable to the Red Cross.
I was just listening to Rick and whatnot before it all started and thinking, gosh, it would be great if, everybody that won this week, he had asked for donations from the Red Cross. If they win, let's just take the winnings and send it to Red Cross.
There's always a silver lining in this dark cloud. I will never forget when the people whom I represent in Whittier rushed to the assistance of others in the wake of the aftershock.
But Red Cross officials say they only hope they've seen their last disaster for this year. With no federal funding, the Red Cross relies solely on private contributions. And with all resources strained from East Coast to West, one official says Hugo and the earthquake have left us with nothing more to draw from. Patricia Ox, CNN, Washington.
Still to come on Prime News, East Germans have a new leader after hardliner Erich Honecker calls it quits in the face of mounting unrest and demands for freedom.
Three Guys Plumbing.
For hair clogs at their worst.
It's for you.
No other drain opener works better than Liquid Plumber.
Liquid Plumber? Never heard of him. Never heard of him?
Call Liquid Plumber first.
It's alive. It's alive. Ugly, creeping mildew. Spray on Tilex Instant Mildew Stain Remover and mildew stains vanish with no scrubbing. Try Tilex. Get your bath laboratory clean.
What are you doing? Hey, Dave, where'd you get that chin? What's wrong with my chin? Where'd you get that nose? It's Dad's. How do you shave under that thing?
Now there's a razor as unique as the Thomas face. The new Slim Twin razor system. Slim Twin has the slimmest cartridge to shave hard-to-reach places, and a choice of pivot or fixed head shaving.
Dave, I'd give Dad back his nose. What's wrong with my nose?
New Slim Twin reaches every place on every face. From Chic.
Most people don't think about high efficiency till it's too late. But if your home doesn't have an efficient Heil furnace, you could be throwing money right up the chimney. A Heil furnace keeps you warm without freezing the rest of your budget. Heil Home Heating Systems, the energy savers.
It would begin as a routine investigation.
All right, I'll nose around, see what I can find out.
And explode into a shocking scandal.
He took advantage of me.
All I'm saying is let's break this story. Well, what if the guy's innocent, for God's sake?
Where does responsible journalism leave off and exploitation begin?
You are not going to sacrifice this child in the name of ratings, Eric.
Martin Sheen. News at 11. Coming in November from Turner Home Entertainment.
Bye.
Where does he get his information about drugs, alcohol, and sex? One day he's a child, and the next he's making decisions that could risk his life. It's a helpless feeling for a parent because you can't always be with him to keep him safe. But you can teach him how to be safe, and those words will stay with him, even when you can't.
We can help you talk about AIDS. Call for a guide.
Offers of help and condolences are coming from around the world on behalf of the earthquake victims and survivors. The Pope offered prayers at the Vatican. Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev expressed sincere sympathy in a telegram to President Bush. Israel is offering a special army rescue squad. The French relief agency is ready to send search teams and trained dogs. Some British engineers are flying to San Francisco tomorrow to help assess the structural damage. And Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher says her nation is ready to give whatever help is needed. Travelers returning from San Francisco are telling